Let's move from gas to water. Today, the findings of the Water Research Commission report was made public. Of course, they delved into what happened during the Hammanskraal cholera outbreak. That was the epicenter of the recent cholera outbreak. There were other areas as well, but over 40 people died, of course, we know this. The report released this morning found that a number of factors conspired to create an environment ripe for a cholera outbreak. Higher than average rainfall, water and wastewater plants not up to standard, broken infrastructure and neglect all played their part in spreading this deadly bacteria. Now, cholera, this report said, was only found in one irrigation system, but Salmonella and Shigella, two other bacteria, were detected. Let's talk about this toxic mix now with epidemiologist Dr. Jo Barnes. Dr. Barnes, thank you so much for joining us. So, similar to, as I was reading this, this introduction to this water story, there are parallels with the gas explosion. A lot of things have to go wrong at once, it seems, to cause a disaster. So no clear source for this outbreak at Hammanskraal as yet. Would you agree, though, Doc, that it could have come from any number of sources, given the many risk factors in the area?
Yes and no. Again, I would just like to add to the previous interview to say, what on earth does sewage do in a stormwater system? And that is part of the reason why that methane was produced and why it exploded. So we are back to the same scenario, and that is that we have abysmal, there is unfortunately no other tactful word, abysmal sewage treatment in many areas of South Africa. South Africa is a powder keg for cholera because of the sewage running in the streets. Lots and lots of people who are not necessarily community health people will go testing water. I understand that, and it needs to be done, but it can't stop there, because the biggest risk of cholera when it has been imported via an infected person is not directly the water first. Water is just carrying the organisms. It is the contaminated, infected sewage that's running down the streets that is the biggest risk. And people in Hammanskraal go to fetch water from water tankers, walk through this mess, put the bucket down where the bottom of the bucket is contaminated, their hands are contaminated, they scoop up water from these buckets, contaminate the rest of the water in the bucket, not in the system. So yes, I agree, the system, the water in the system in Hammanskraal was really not fit for human consumption, but it did not contain cholera organisms. But it was nevertheless at the point of use already contaminated because of the massive sewage leakages in the area.
Yeah, exactly. So when the infrastructure breaks down, people turn away from the normally trusted water coming from their taps, and they end up having to go to water tankers, and that increased the risk of these bacteria spreading. One thing that came out of today's report release is that Salmonella and I think it's called Shigella were two dangerous bacteria that were picked up. Talk to me about how dangerous those two bacteria are.
All of those are indications, together with a very high E. coli count, and that is a surefire indication of sewage contamination of any water where it has a high E. coli count. Those are all gut bacteria, and they all make people ill with various types of diarrhea, etc. And unfortunately, it hits people in impoverished areas the worst because they are already undernourished and often suffer from other conditions such as TB or HIV. So it is very disturbing. And by the way, down these waterways like the Arctis River, etc., there are numbers of small agricultural units producing food such as vegetables, which will then spread the infection even further. We come right back to sewage, and we've been pleading so long with all the authorities to do proper oversight over sanitation in our urban areas, and it has up to now been fallen on deaf ears. In fact, one local politician told me a while ago when I pleaded. He said to me, there are no votes for me in sewage.
And it
So
was, yeah.
I'm
I mean,
afraid,
it's really
it is
distressing.
partly political will.
So I'll delve into that a little bit later, but there was something that the Water Research Commission head said today. She said that the report found Rooiwal and Themba, their wastewater plants, need urgent refurbishment to prevent the Arpies River, and I quote, basically turning into a sewer. Apart from the real risk to human life from that happening, what does that suggest about what is happening to some of our most important waterways in this country?
I'm afraid that we're actually turning a vast number of our rivers into open sewers. And our wastewater treatment works are functioning so poorly. A large number of them are in a critical state already or totally non-functioning. What comes in goes out, and what goes out goes to the nearest river. So we are contaminating massively with poorly treated or untreated sewage our rivers, which in many cases form the so-called clean water for the next town downstream. And we are polluting our water so badly that we are actually producing raw water, as they say it, what comes into the water treatment works to clean up for drinking purposes. It is so dirty that it is impossible to clean properly with the technology that they have. So we are creating a countrywide situation, and I have to tell you that these things are badly underfunded. And even our disaster plans for these outbreaks, we have the plans, but there are no funds to execute them.
Yeah.
So we wait until these things occur, and it's going to happen again.
Yeah, and that's particularly worrying given we've just heard of another imported case from a man who travelled to Pakistan. And we know from the Blue and Green Drop interim watch reports that a third of our wastewater systems are in trouble. However, there was a sense after what happened at Hammanskraal, particularly with the National Water Department stepping in, that this was a bit of a wake-up call and that there is going to be some strong action. Do you believe change is coming? Do you believe that the authorities now know they simply cannot continue in this way?
It's an expensive wake-up call because it costs a number of lives, and we haven't yet heard the full total because until just under 50, the government stopped releasing any information. And they are also a bit, how can I say, precious with their data because they only classify those as cholera cases who died in hospital with a positive test. So the many who died outside of the health system are not counted. It is, in other words, even the gift of the giver said it is far larger than the government's figures at the moment reflect. So we need to realize that we can't wait until people die and there's a dire situation, because this is now countrywide. Given our economy that is tottering on the brink, where will we now find the money for curing the self-inflicted wounds? In a way, as a public health person, I'm angry.
Yeah. I think many South Africans are angry, particularly when we know some of that money at least was corrupted and went into someone's back pocket. Let's hope it is indeed the wake-up call that is needed. Thank you so much for your views this evening, epidemiologist Dr. Jo Barnes.